o'clock here on April 15th. We'll call to order this negotiations committee meeting with the Williston Educators Association. Kind of agenda, hoping what we're covered tonight would be review of the previous meeting minutes, some tentative agreements to review and hopefully sign from last meeting, and then we can continue through some of the remaining proposals that are out there. So with that, we'll turn it over to you, Seth.
All right, thank you very much. Well, good to see you again. It's a beautiful day out there. Yeah. As Mr. John said, we've got minutes to approve. You had a chance to check them out, and if not, we can take a little time.
Briefly check them out. Amanda?
Yeah, I thought they looked good.
Okay. Thank you. So, as Mr. Judd noted, we've got a couple tentative agreements on things based on our discussions last time. Just so you know what I've done is I've actually included them in, the proposals that our counters that we're gonna give back. So it's kind of something where we'll maybe talk about them at the same time with the other responses. That makes sense. Yep. So I'm gonna give you 3 copies, just with Mrs. Glavin being gone here. For a copy. Yeah. We'll go ahead and start once have to get that from you. And to be clear, I'm not expecting or asking you to sign that tentative agreement right here, right now. Take it back, look at it, and get all of that. But board proposal number 1, that was we reached a tentative agreement on last time. This is just the kind of housekeeping, modifying the district's number, so it's District 7 rather than 007. But if you have a chance, we'd like you to, during the clock, just take a look at that, see if there are any concerns. Same thing with number 2, board proposal number 2. I believe we reached tentative agreement on that, but by all means, to make sure you have plenty of time to take a look at it. Look it over. And the same with number 3. Work proposal number 4 was where I think our next stop will be. We've got this is the sick leave benefits. We've got some modifications that we made to our proposal based on some of the feedback we received last week. Good feedback. We still have the striking of the first paragraph on some of the obsolete language from previous districts. And you'd indicated you were in agreement with that before, but I left it because we probably take care of this each if we can. So what you'll see here, previously we had talked about, moving the note request, to be at the superintendent's discretion. There were some concerns brought up about how is that going to work? What's that going to be based on, any of that sort of thing. So what we modified it additionally here to make it clear that, an absence may require the doctor's note at the discretion of the superintendent or designee. That be based on, reasonable suspicion that staff attendance policy has been violated. The stating of reasonable suspicion there just to address your point about what would we be tying this to, what is the standard, and what, just as an example of what we're looking at here, if Seth Thompson is using every Friday for sick leave, that would give a person, a reasonable, suspicion that something isn't, correct there or whatnot. It's a requirement that there has to be something, something to look at, or something, that's causing you to believe that, there's perhaps sick leave not being used correctly, that sort of thing. It's not, so it's a limiting factor, really, is what it is. And any questions on that, just as drafted there?
You're talking about like the staff attendance stuff.
One you have. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. And I guess what we could have done, and if you'd like, we can, put the code on that too, that might make it.
Yeah, maybe, we'll have to look at language anyway, but if we were to look at it, and that would be one recommendation I would have, because
Makes sense.
then people can actually go and find that policy on their own if they're interested.
Makes good sense. So that's what we have on, proposal number 4 there. For proposal number 5, that was the, sick leave bank that we've been previously talking about, and I think during the last session, you had just kind of received what was the final or looked to be in the final form. We haven't made any changes to our number 5 here, but, throughout the course of the evening, we would certainly like to hear if there were any points that you wanted to, make about, the draft document, that sort of stuff, or if there anything that stuck out that you wanted to talk about. I'm not asking for a response now, but just letting you know kind of how we see that move forward. Because otherwise, I think we can probably reach TA on that one fairly quick, I believe. Okay, for proposal number 6, this was the emergency leave. Tied to weather or whatnot, we've had a discussion on this previously, contract today, has somewhat of a limiting factor in, it's 2 days can be granted based on the superintendent or designate's discretion. Our purpose in taking, out the 2 days piece there was to, if it's gonna be the superintendent's discretion, let's not already tie the hands by specifying 2 days. So we remained where we were with, this leave may be granted at the superintendent or designee's, discretion there. The more we thought about it, we think it actually, again, it limits the discretion if we keep, the 2 days in. But we remain.
And we did have the same proposal with the Administrators Association.
Thank you. Good point. Moving on to board proposal number 7. This relates to the personal leave. Previously, the board proposal on this one was that any unpaid leave must be approved by the school board. We had a good discussion on this last time. We appreciated the feedback. A lot of discussion on, well, what's this process look like? Is there a form? I don't want to necessarily be talking about, sensitive issues, which we're certainly in agreement with. So we've modified this one to, first off, make it clear that this is only related to non-medical related unpaid leave. That, we're hoping, one, we're not interested in, getting into details on, specific health related issues. That's not what we're looking at. So we figured making that change there would, change this a little bit so that it's, if Seth Thompson is looking to take some unpaid leave for, just thinking about this trip or whatnot, that's what we're talking about here. It's got to be approved by the school board, but what the process we're looking at is, before it would go to the board, if you're requesting this, you'd have to confer with your building administration, who would make a recommendation to the superintendent. If, the building admin and the superintendent deny, the request, it doesn't go to the board. But if the superintendent, approves the request, the superintendent would make a recommendation for the board to consider that. And we would put together a form, for people to use. I don't think anything in here is preventing someone from being there to, request it, but, this is more of a form-driven request process the way it's drafted down. One of the concerns we heard last week was it could be intimidating standing there asking, and we were, we recognized that. So we've set it up this way, but again, it wouldn't prevent you from going and asking.
And non-medical, I'm assuming it would be like our sick leave, or is that different? Are they the same term? Like non-medical would be, like if it was sick days, is that the same they're used synonymously.
I
there?
guess I'm kind of, anything health related type,
Okay.
we can tighten that up some more if we're looking at it, but we're trying to be a little bit broad and capture, health related issues or, things,
So we're talking primarily just personal unpaid days. What we're, I think, ultimately want to get to.
because at the end of the day, you've got contracted set amount of days and that. If there's some thought on, massaging or tweaking the, non-medical statement there, we can certainly do that. I think we're talking the same thing. Nobody wants to pry into somebody's, personal details like that. That isn't the intent at all.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, because I think it's listed as sick leave in other places, so I just wanted to make sure it's used together as one term.
Moving on, number 8, was proposal number 8. 8 is the proposal by which we're seeking to address the situation where somebody's educator license lapses during the school year, during the term. We've heard some feedback, last time we met, we had a lot of this discussion about the cure period and whatnot. So what we've modified this now. So it says, if the teacher's license lapses, the teacher must renew the license as quickly as reasonably practical. If the time of the license lapse exceeds 30 days, the teacher will be in material breach of their contract. During this time period, WEA agrees that such license lapse will be disqualifying misconduct, preventing the teacher from employment eligibility. Any time during which the teacher's license has lapsed will require the teacher to be on unpaid leave without access to any paid leave. And if, there's a little caveat on the bottom that if a teacher with a lapsed license has a substitute teacher's license, that teacher may be allowed to substitute teach at the current substitute rate at the superintendent or designee's discretion. I see I got a typo on superintendent there. What we're seeking to do here is, there needs to be a period for someone to fix a problem that happens, We're also not wanting someone to wait 29 days to renew it or all that. That's what the, you have to renew it as reasonably practical language is addressing that. And we're also, one of the things when we write contract language is to think about the unintended consequences and, unique situations and all of that. Just to prevent and make it clear that this isn't something where, if you're on unpaid leave for that period of time, that would, allow you unemployment compensation or, that process. We're making it clear in the contract that that's disqualifying misconduct for that. And, well, any questions on that?
So anytime during which the teacher's license has lapsed will require the teacher to be on unpaid leave without access to any paid leave. So if they're sitting on the 4 personal days, they couldn't access that under this plan.
Under this plan during that time frame, no. Part of the thought is, you wouldn't be entitled to your sick leave, not working, different things like that. This is to make sure that we address the issue if the person gets it renewed as soon as possible.
Are they still entitled to their insurance and those things during that time?
Yeah, nothing has changed there. Now, if, you go past the 30 days, that person is a, material breach of their contract, that could lead to, termination of employment, that sort of thing. And then, that whole process could trigger and all of that, but. Good question. Any other follow-up on that?
So that would be at the superintendent's discretion that if they're holding on to their sub license, they might be able to come back into the classroom at a sub rate not their rate. Right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Number 9, this was the proposal, got, just another kind of language cleanup from the old, obsolete language from District 98. And we've got it, lined up there as tentative agreement signatures, if you get a chance to take a look at that. Moving on to board proposal number 10. The very first change there, was referencing that the schedule will be, based off the building bill schedule. I think we, in concept, you're in agreement with that, based on our discussion last time. The next clause or the next paragraph talks about, an emergency happening on a teacher's duty-free lunch. One of the questions that was brought up last time was, help us understand, just give me a little more detail. How's that going to operate? So what we wanted to do is to make it clear that that only applies if you're essentially on the building property there. If you're on your duty-free lunch and you're, not there, you're not expected to, race across town and get over there, that sort of thing. That's not what we're specifying. We wanted to make it clear, though, that if you're there and there's an emergency that happens, we all got to participate. We all got to respond. Hoping that that would address some of those concerns. Moving on, some of the additional questions we had related to in-house substitution comp. I'll just start in kind of the middle there, the power up, power down. We kind of talked last time, seemed something that we had a tentative agreement on. We had some questions related to the, 6 through 12, the compensation that's prorated there, and then the K through 5 prorated amount there. And what we have proposed there is how it operates today. We went back and did some double checking. Taking the 6 through 12, for example, you'd be compensated at your internal, prorated on your internal sub rate there. So it's not seeking a substantive type change, but it's more so identifying what we have going on today. And the same would be for the K through 5 piece.
It's operating, I think, as you guys were suggesting last time when you talked about it being like your daily rate prorated. That's functionally how it is occurring, and that's our intent here. So it's not based off of like the 170 substitute rate. It's based off the daily rate of that specific teacher that's substituting, and then prorated accordingly.
And we've got the remaining, language that we identified in our previous proposal regarding the multi-grade classroom and identifies the exact time applying to classroom teachers that's defined by law. Board proposal number 11, related to coordinators. That's something that we're both kind of currently, looking at, reevaluating there. So I don't have any specific on that. Proposal 12. We have your board proposal number 1 had, updated the date to 2025 through 2027. And your proposal also changed the March 1st to January 20th. I just simply, and we're in agreement with that. I just simply made those same tweaks on ours. And that'll be something, I think we're at a tentative agreement on that, but I didn't want to be presumptuous, so I didn't put the signature block on that, but.
And as I understand it, that's typically something that gets kind of done at the end. Whether it's a 2-year deal, 1-year deal, that's typically one of the ones that's signed towards the end of the process.
I don't know that there's a specific, I mean, you can bargain for a different term contract and all of that. It's something that a lot of it is tied to economic. You know, if you're wanting to hold off on that, that's not a problem. You know, it doesn't have to go that way. I guess the real answer is I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer on that, but at the same time, you know, just by way of example, if you're seeking a one-year contract, you know, that may impact economic proposals, you know, because part of what the board committee is considering is, you know, the larger package and, you know, there's efficiencies in having a 2-year
And-
versus 1 year.
And our intent is to get to a 2-year as well, but if all of a sudden, you know, we drop a bomb on this thing at the end and everything goes haywire, God forbid it does, and we have to go to a 1 year and we all agree that that's the best way forward, then we want to make sure that that
Well,
flexibility.
the flexibility would be there. These tentative agreements are all subject to the final agreement. At the end of the day, if you said we're tentatively agreeing to a 2-year deal right here, and we get to the process and all of that, and, you know, at the end of it, whatnot, you know, 1-year agreement is what it gets modified to. That's something the parties can do. Part of the idea, though, is to the extent we can tentatively agree, take them off the table and narrow the list of things that we're dealing with. That's really kind of what we're seeking to do. But kind of having a little bit of a fallback position because it's tentative agreement. Our next proposal is actually a response to one of your proposals. We have proposal number 5 was the request for flexible summer professional development into possibly identify a class or training that might be beneficial and to use that in lieu of professional development day later on. We told you last time we liked that proposal, but we wanted to maybe make a couple little tweaks to it. So we took your proposal here and, you know, you can see what we've modified. I think we made it, at least to us, seemed a little more clear. We need to specify a time by which that you have to request the time. And Mrs. Glavin had explained last time that in our previous employment she had, you know, they did it by the end of the school year, and that seems to work. So that's just quite frankly where we took that from. And then what we're saying is that you need to request your approval for this through, you know, we'll provide district provided Google form document prior to the end of the year. We made a couple tweaks on the next paragraph, just making it clear that if you do, you know, take that class, for example, that you've gotten pre-approved and you're allowed during one of the days to not go attend a larger session, for example, you know, you will use that time for working in the classrooms or other instructional planning, unless it's approved by the superintendent, giving, you know, an option there, because you can think of a variety of different constructive type things that need to be done and all of that. And rather than trying to identify all of them, it's probably easier this way. The final piece you see on there is that the board committee will agree to this proposal and a memorandum of understanding with a 1-year trial basis. You've maybe heard me talk a little bit about how sometimes, you know, if you've got contract language that kind of interested in it, you think it makes sense, but you know, you're just want to see how it works. It works to do, for example, a memorandum like this on a trial basis. If we do it on a trial basis and it works, I certainly envisioned it's something that, you know, moving forward would be permanently memorialized. But this way, it gives us an opportunity just to kind of see how it works with the coordination of, you know, other, you know, folks you bring in for the classes and those sorts of things.
So then at the end of next school year, the agreement would have to be opened up to see if this needed to be changed. Is that how that would work? Or if we settle on a 2-year agreement?
Yep, so here's how I would envision it. So let's just say that there's a 1-year memorandum of understanding for a 1-year trial period, you have a 2-year contract. You roll through that next year and everybody looks at each other and says, this really worked. Just memorialize it in, you know, it's no longer on trial basis. You know, I could see taking the exact same memorandum of understanding and, you know, taking the trial basis piece out of it and identifying that it'll be incorporated into the agreement during the next negotiation or something, you know, of that effect. It wouldn't open up a series of negotiations or anything like that, I guess is
Okay,
what I would say. It's not opening up the contract, those sorts of things.
okay.
We see a lot of value in this. I think it's a really good proposal. I think the 1 year trial period for us is more on logistical piece of it. Is the end of the school year working for your folks to submit? Is that working from a planning perspective for district administration in terms of PD days that they're planning? So that's just more of a logistical piece, I think, that we want to make sure that that's
Yeah.
flowing accordingly for both sides.
Maybe a dumb question, but
No,
I'll throw it
not a
out
dumb
there
question.
anyways. Technically, we would have missed the boat for this year with this. Was that, wouldn't this go into effect July 1st, the agreement?
Yeah.
So for teachers this year, it wouldn't be applicable.
Yeah.
Now that I'm sitting here kind of
Yeah, let's think of
digesting
this.
that, right?
Right,
Or,
We can have some discussions on that. I mean, without knowing what's in the works right now, you know, you have to kind of see.
so I was just sitting here thinking about that. Technically, this goes into effect 1st of July. So then that means next school year, they could have that option. They wouldn't have that option this summer.
Maybe stated differently, it would be your request or desire, if it was feasible to do it, to apply now. We'll have to talk on that. I don't know. I mean, given where we're at school year wise.
No, but that's excellent feedback.
One other point I think I would have is, I think it would be important for, especially for WIA to, you know, assuming we move forward with something like this, to communicate with its members that, yeah, you can wait until, you know, the end of the school year to make your request. But let's just think about, let's just say your request is for, you know, a class a week after that. You're really narrowing your window and you're probably not doing yourself any favors. Putting it in such a short timeline. I would put this in, you know, to make sure there's ample time there to plan.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, I can imagine that there are classes or various curriculum and different things that you maybe just learned about, or, you know, you're not aware of, that, you know, things come up later. So we understand that, you know, it might be closer to that time frame when us gets put in.
And I know a lot of our colleagues now have already started thinking about what they're gonna take for the summer. Then we all have to plan our summers, whether, you know, around our other things. So,
Yeah.
you know, I know a lot of other colleagues that are already talking about PD they're gonna take, whether they're gonna be in Bismarck, whether they're gonna be in Middle, whether those types of things. So yeah, I mean, we should be able to stay ahead of that as professionals, you would think.
And like Mr. James said, thank you for bringing this one forward. This is a good. We talked about win-win, but that, I think this certainly has the potential to be that. Now, in responding to, I didn't print off, you know, and go through. You've got a bunch of additional proposals. We kind of verbally responded last time. A lot of them relate to economics that we're gonna need to take care of, you know, once we get into the money discussion, and some of them we'll consider to contemplate, but some of them are pretty difficult things for us to make movement on, you know, identifying in contracts the specific location and the specific subject matter. We'll continue to listen to what you have to say without a doubt, but that's a really, really difficult area for us. But we want to be clear, you still have our commitment, and more so administration's commitment, I should say, that if there have to be reassignments and all of that, we want to make this as pain-free to the extent we can as possible. No one, you know, meaning communication is going to be coming, and discussions about what makes sense and that you can
That's good to know. So I know those are still coming up and they're coming up with our assembly. We were notified today of from some assembly members that feel like they're kind of getting pushed into situations that they're not comfortable with, so we're taking all that in real time. And even before we got here, had a person reach out to us and let us know that, hey, I'm being assigned, and I told them that, you know, this is all stuff that we're talking about. You know, we're trying to flesh this out as we go and make sure that we're doing the best we can with those things as it relates to our proposals. So
Sure.
So thank you for still listening.
Yep.
Well,
So if you want
do we
to
want
take
to
some
take
time or
a
what?
bit of caucus time, go through, look at these?
Yep.
And then we can text you and
Absolutely.
then we can meet back. Is that real? Okay, well, awesome, thank you.
Okay, we're, in 6:32, we'll go ahead and turn this
buy those store bought flour tortillas, you smear cream cheese on them, sprinkle everything bagel on it.
Oh, yeah.
Roll it up, cut it into slices, smear it, put melted butter on it, put it in the air fryer.
Are we still muted?
These little bagel bites.
No.
Again. All right, we're back at 7:10 PM.
All right. Sorry that took so long, had to ask a million questions. Everybody's staring at me. All right, so, as it relates to board proposal number 1 and 2, that we, TA to sign that off, during caucus, and we have that, you guys want to as well. And number 3 as well. We signed off on this, yeah, so there's both of those things signed off. Do you want those now or later?
You send when we'll take right care of that, we'll,
Okay.
get them.
Set these off the side then.
Yeah, just for now.
Let's see here. Yep. That's right. So with board proposal number 4, we're okay with it. And we get the reference to the code.
Yeah.
In there, and I think we get that in there, I think we got. 4 makes a lot of sense.
EEAB.
Yep.
That's what we have done. And as it relates to number 5, or proposal number 5. We would like to stick to our language. We like our language. We feel like our language keeps us in the process. They're essentially saying the same things. We agree to the administrative policy. We would just like to reference back to legal proposal number 2 and use our language, that we feel like that just keeps us in the process.
In other words, it's contained in district administrative regulations.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then it still remains in the NA. All right, board proposal number 6. As we were looking at it, and Seth, this might be a way in which you can work some of that magic for us. To help us get this one across the finish line. We still like the idea of having some kind of reference to weather. So what we were thinking was, instead of additional emergency leave may be granted by the superintendent or designee, we just add additional emergency leave, which will include weather related emergencies may be granted by the superintendent or designee. So we'll still have that little piece in there. Okay with that.
Yep.
Okay. All right, moving on. To board proposal number 7. Board proposal number 7, like you had mentioned earlier, that there's just some that are hard for you guys to get to. This one's hard for us to get to. I guess our counter, if what we would like to put out there is, let's just get board policy DDC, the unpaid leave policy. If we want to use that instead, I think that's something that we could get to there. Right, so we want to get the DDC language in the negotiated.
So. What? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. so
Sure.
totally from saying it.
Sure.
What you're saying is. We would prefer that under this, rather than the language we provided, unpaid leave will be, granted or not granted in accordance with, board policy DDC. Is that the unpaid leave policy? Is that what you're saying?
Right, so here's what we're trying to get to. Yeah. Okay, into the agreement. So
The
let's
actual,
go ahead and take board policy and we'll use that for our agreement and that's what we'll go off.
the actual language of policy you're asking for, as opposed to a reference to it, or?
Correct. Just use this language right here. We think this is pretty good and makes a lot of sense.
Could you provide some context, Jeff, maybe on, I guess, Leah's position on why you feel the superintendent should have the authority to grant unpaid leave, which would be a change to the contract that is between the school board and that specific teacher in the case of I'm out of days and I want to take a trip to Minneapolis as an example.
Sure, we still view the superintendent as a part of day-to-day operations. We don't see the board as a part of day-to-day operations. We'd like to answer to people that are involved in the day-to-day operations. And if there's issues with that being abused or given, then the board, we feel the board would then ask questions to the superintendent. That would be a matter between them.
Is the intention, I mean, it feels like if we already have a policy here to then. It kind of. I guess we don't understand too why it would be put in a negotiated agreement differently if it's already a policy here. Maybe that's not the intent of this policy, but that's how we have viewed it.
Well, we're talking about folks with contracts that, executed with the board and, how those, can be modified and amended and all of that. That's the, I guess. Give it lose battery.
It's on like one bar, so if you had died, so.
Just take 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, okay.
Yeah, usually the lights on. Thank you.
All right, we're back on 7:19 after changing a battery because the recorder died on us, so part of the recording on this might be missing a few minutes, but we'll go ahead. We're back talking about the board proposal number 7. Well, we'll look at what you're mentioning there, but it is a, concern of ours, who the parties are in the contract and making those decisions on that. We'll look at that. Bunch of them.
All right. Let's go to number 8. We agree with number 8. We like what was done there. We'd be ready for a TA for number 8.
Okay.
Was uncomfortable agreeing with a lawyer, but we appreciate that work
Get
you
it?
put out there, right? That was well written, and
I won't hold it against you.
Kevin, thank you. I appreciate that. That'd be hard to answer in some of my circles. All right. Board proposal number 9. And we signed that one during break as well. Pull that off, put that one to the side. Okay.
Moving right along here.
Yep. Number 10. Number 10's a lot. Number 10's a lot. We're still trying to process that. One of the other questions we had was if we could clarify the internal sub rate. Right now, it's at daily base salary rate. And if we could clarify that formula, and then can we clarify the internal sub rate? And Chris, did you say that's what we think we're operating on right now, or that's what we want to get to?
That's the current practice on how it's being paid. Cause
Okay.
based off of like if Mrs. Mo is substituting, it's whatever her daily
Her number is.
her daily rate is prorated for however many, is it hours?
It's based on either hours or periods, depending on what grade level.
And that is the internal sub rate. That's what the language right now is. not what we're
That's what in
currently
our
doing.
circle is referred to as the internal rate.
Okay, we were just confused on that. So then when it says the daily base salary, what's the difference between those two?
It's the internal sub rate.
Okay.
It's all the same.
So it's just the
We're trying
language.
to clarify the language, that it's the internal sub.
Okay. Okay.
Did you guys discuss any language that you were comfortable with?
No, we were
Just
We were
writing
trying to
down?
better understand.
Yeah, we were confused about what it meant.
Yeah, I mean.
We thought that's what you had, but we wanted to clarify.
Fair question. Right, and then, towards the back with the, I guess we're still curious procedurally when we get to F. How that looks if we strike subsecretary, does that mean that we communicate directly with the building administrator since they are solely responsible now? I mean, I'm all for calling Audrey at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm sure she would get a hoot out of it, but. So that's what we were more looking at procedurally, how striking subsecretary would work, who we would be answering to, I guess, in that case.
Yeah, because it's unlikely our building admin wants to start calling subs at 4,
Yeah,
so.
I mean, the intent with what we were trying to do here is just to make because when it says will be responsible. Just identifying technically who's responsible for that, that's building administration, but we get your points on kind of wanting to know procedurally what would you like us to do. Yeah,
Okay. And then once we got to the bottom two, we were curious, what the intent was or the clause at the bottom, this only applies to classroom and teachers as defined in century code, what? Yes. Help me out with that.
Sure. Classroom teachers is defined by century code, meaning, you know, folks that are licensed by the Education and Standards Practices Board and primarily employed as a classroom teacher would be the ones that are eligible for contact time. I think, you know, in previous discussions, based on, you know, the unit that, you know, WIA has sought to represent, you know, there's a, at least as I've seen it, a desire by WIA to, you know, go a little bit beyond what the statutory definition of teacher is. And we're making it clear that this applies to classroom teachers, the folks that are having that express student contact time like that. That's the intent behind it. And that hit your question or?
I think so.
So when you agreed to recognize our negotiating or bargaining unit, that language, is that what, this is the same exact language as that, or is this different?
If I'm not completely 100% sure on the question, so I'll try to answer. Tell me.
Okay.
Student contact time is for, in our view, for teachers, classroom teachers. In using the language of the unit and all of that, the word teachers has kind of been used more broadly, I guess. And what we're trying to say is we're making it clear this, you know, we're talking about teachers as defined by law, not necessarily kind of the more broad terminology encompassing more classifications.
Okay. Do you have like some examples of who would not fall in that then?
Anybody who's not a individual that's licensed by the board and employed primarily as a classroom teacher.
Okay.
I mean. Counselor.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at it right now, that right up here in student contact time kind of lays it out pretty well, I think.
I can't remember if it was last negotiation cycle or the prior one, I mean, where you see the term student contact shall be defined, I believe that was language that was kind of negotiated. I think it was last go around on what exactly student contact meant, and certainly that fits, I think, within the roles and responsibilities of a classroom teacher as defined by century code.
All right, is it all right if we have more time with Ken? Is that doable with?
Absolutely.
All right, so
Yeah,
we'll maybe try and
that's
have.
that's
flesh
part of
that
this whole
out.
process. We ask questions, we try to understand more what the party's looking at. No,
It feels like there's just a lot going on with 10. Then
one suggestion I maybe do have, and it's something I could have done, but didn't. Let's at least, you know, I guess I could have put tentative agreement on the couple pieces that were kind of cleaned up, but given the multiple pieces in there, let's, you know, as we go forward, I'll do this in mind for sure. I'll identify, you know, we've tentatively agreed to this paragraph here. So when you're taking a look at it, you know, we don't have as many moving parts. Would that be helpful?
that would be helpful.
Okay.
All right.
No.
All the lessons. All right, so here's one of, and then we get to, your calendar with our proposal number 5. We like that you guys saw the value in the proposal, and we appreciate that. And one of the questions we have, this is the last thing we did when we were counting down under the gun with a minute left. We're like, oh, we gotta get out of here. is it possible that we could get this ready to roll it out for a trial this year?
Like we mentioned just before our caucus, we're having those discussions.
Sure.
We don't,
Okay,
I can't
Right.
commit to that, but that's something that administration is looking at right now to see. All right, what does this look like if we were to, try and do that?
Mhm.
Hoping we can have an answer soon. I mean, don't take that as by the end of the night,
Right,
we're
right,
gonna have an answer, but I think we should be able to have an answer for sure by the next time we meet.
Okay.
But yeah, because it's a legitimate point, but we also don't wanna. I mean, one of the things I wanna point out is we don't wanna set this thing up to fail,
Right.
because it's quick timing as it would be and all that, and if it doesn't quite roll out how it would if you had more planning time, we don't wanna
Right,
cause that sort of problem, but.
right. I was just thinking about the trial year. If we get to a 2-year agreement and then we don't have it this year and then we have it the second year. And then we're right back into the negotiation cycle again at the end of that second year, if we gave it enough time to get the information that we needed. With it, so. But outside of that, the language that was changed, it's excellent. It's pretty good. So. Yeah. Now that get this on this one?
Yep.
All right. And do you want to leave now or?
We can,
Doesn't matter.
give me a couple minutes here.
Okay.
Were there any, we had said that we're remaining as is on, the remaining proposals and all that, and a lot of them frankly are economic. Anything in particular remaining as is, I guess, where you're at, or is there any other pieces to address, look at?
With, in respect to Leah's proposals?
Yep.
We are still fleshing out quite a bit of stuff, and we're trying to get information in order to move forward on some of these proposals too.
Okay, is that information you're seeking from us, or is that kind of?
No, for, this, I want to try and remain symmetry, but we might end up bouncing around here. For example, the USRE, we're getting a survey out to the taxpayers. We've heard over and over the last couple of weeks that, what do the taxpayers think? What do the taxpayers think? I thought, well, why don't we go ask the taxpayers? Let's get that out to them. So we're in the process of trying to roll that out. I think as of right now, as the survey's been administered as is, I think we got close to 400 responses. Obviously, we'd like to have more than that. And we'd like to get that out in the community and see what the taxpayers think about those issues. So we're trying to get some information there so that maybe we can have a better understanding moving forward. Let's see, get to my notes here. What the prep time? Let's go. We can go right down the list if that's all right, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever works for you.
Let's get, so that we're not just bouncing around and. All right. So we. Okay, so here's, one of the questions that we had as it related to prep time. And I get it. I get both sides of this debate. We can see both sides. Is it possible then that when a teacher's not receiving their prep time, or we have incidences then where for whatever reason, they're not receiving their prep time, is there a way forward that they can apply for some kind of compensation? Is there anything out there that is available to them? For example, we meet after school, we have an after hour meetings beyond the school day that we can sign. Is there something that when this is being breached, they can sign that? So if they look, I haven't had my prep time in 2 weeks, is there something they can request for additional compensation? That was one of the questions I had as we were looking at prep time.
And I think this, relates especially to, maybe not consistently not getting it, like if you're getting it. For this whole month, I got my minimum of 300 minutes, but then the next week, we had testing and, that testing fell over all my prep time that week because the schedule was different. But then we returned again to getting 300 minutes. So like for that week that I did not receive that, is there, I guess, language that we can look at where we could get compensation? We didn't know if we could change a lot of the language at this point or how that works with the terms of negotiating or the act of negotiating.
One of the questions I guess I have, and one, my understanding is, again, it's a rare situation if there is something that comes up, because as discussed, I don't think we have situations of folks not getting the goal of the 300. But I just want to point out, we've got multiple folks on here getting far more than the 300. And I mean, I'm not trying to say that, let's average this out throughout the year, thinking out loud. If, on one hand, if the request is going to be for compensation for any time it falls below 300, what about the corollary to that for any time it goes above 300? When you're getting more than the goal. It seems it would have to be a two-way street on a situation like that. I don't know, I'm thinking out loud.
Right, and what we're trying to do is just figure out if there's not a way forward. Is there still some kind of incentive at the end of the rope? Or at the end of the stick that says, hey, look, we recognize that we didn't meet this goal. We tried, we didn't meet it, but there's this instead.
What if we exceeded it for 3 weeks during that month, and the 1 week due to some unforeseen circumstances we did, That's the point I'm trying to make. It's part of I remember previous discussions on this, and I'm sure you do as well, Mrs. Mo. I mean, we want prep time. We understand it's important. There's no doubt about that. But it's sometimes things happen. And if you're gonna tie it to that specific number, then I think we also got to factor in or think about what happens when there's that much additional time above that that's given. I look at this, and I may be looking at this differently or, wrong, but I look at this from a perspective of it's hard to make contract language and all of that expressly deal with the anomaly, the couple times situation and all that. When you look at it on a larger basis, as we're seeing here, where you've got 420 minutes, 470 minutes, 420, 495, 445. It just seems inequitable to penalize for those rare situations where it goes below, but not address if there's a collective, average of being much more above. My thoughts on it.
Good thoughts. All right, let's slide on, if we will. Let's see, so that would have been 4, it's gonna be 11. If we work them. All right, to 6. And 7, we'll start with 6, so. We've reached out to Minot in respect to 6. And. They said they've had it for a while. I know last week you said you had some experience with Minot over the years and it didn't ring a bell. I think we saw it early on in one of the, right at the beginning of the page. So maybe it's kind of in those flyover pages, the ones that we just kind of glance through. And they seem to just go past us. But I know they've had it, they said they haven't had any issues with it. As far as I understand it, it's kind of a mute point to them. But have you guys talked to any of them from the school board side or asked Minot by any chance about it or?
Well, I guess I would pose the question here, so in previous discussions on this one. The position from your guys' side is, example, you're hired as a 3rd grade teacher at Lewis and Clark, you're a 3rd grade teacher at Lewis and Clark for year 1, you can stay with the district till year 5, you're the 3rd grade teacher at Lewis and Clark for year 1 or year 5. So what is the district to do if we were to put this into contract language and we have 4 sections of 3rd grade at Lewis and Clark and New Elementary opens up and now we only have 3 sections at Lewis and Clark, or enrollment dictates that we should only have 3 sections at Lewis and Clark for 3rd grade teachers, and now we've got 4 of them in their contract language that says you're a 3rd grade teacher at Lewis and Clark. Are we stuck with that teacher being a 3rd grade teacher at Lewis and Clark, and we just adjust the sections down so we've got 10 students in the classroom, or how would you guys see that playing out?
Is it considered breach of contract if you put it on the contract and then you have to reassign? Or we have voice and choice in the reassignment, but if we have that, if we have to move somewhere else because that section closes, is it breach of contract for you to reissue a contract? Or I guess speak from the lawyer perspective of how that works.
So if you specified in the contract that Seth Thompson will be teaching at, this particular building, and I will be teaching math, which would be terrible for students. And the administration, was in a situation where they have to make some reassignments and all of that. My concern would be that there would be a lawsuit over, or even starting it out, saying, I have a contract that says that I teach at this particular school and I teach math. I am being, forced to do something different. That's a breach of contract. I believe that would result in litigation. I really do. And the concern is, one of my concerns is, if you specify all of those things and nobody volunteers or nobody says, hey, I'll do that, I'll move over there, what is the district going to do? That's kind of back to Mr. John's question. What are we going to do? If there's no ability to reassign, that's my concern with it. One of my concerns with it. I guess I just want to be clear, we've heard you based on, the discussions about how things rolled out previously. And that is not something anybody wants to replicate. Having discussions about how to make this best, how to respect people's time and all of those sorts of things. And, recognizing that nobody wants to do this. That level of communication is something that you're definitely going to see. I have a hard time from a legal standpoint specifying those particular contract terms in there, because it really gives control over what can happen.
So I have a question about the board policy that you cited last time, the OE dash 4.12. I was just curious, because it looks like it would be measured on that indicator 1. And I guess I copied it, you don't have it.
Yeah, that would be.
I guess we're just curious how that works, like.
Thank you.
It says a survey distributed by the Human Resource Department will indicate that 50% of the respondents have been reasonably included in professional decisions that affect them. So does that mean, like, I guess the way I read it is at the end of the year or in some point, a survey sent out and then to all staff or staff that were maybe, like you said, they have to close the 4th grade section and now they have to be reassigned because we don't have that class. I guess I'm just curious about what the board's vision of that was and how that works.
Yeah, so how the OEs and the results ultimately work, there's been a reasonable interpretation that's been provided to the board that says, here's how we interpret OE 4.12. The board either says, yeah, we agree that's a reasonable interpretation. Now, at that point, it moves into the monitoring phase. That's where the board is at with OEs and results. You're monitoring those, and there's an indicator such as indicator 1 on this that we evaluate the superintendent on. So in this case, a survey would be distributed by the Human Resources Department to staff across the district, not necessarily just teachers, that might include parents, et cetera. And 50%, if less than 50% responded that, you know, they felt that they were not reasonably included in any decisions that affected them, then the board would consider that to be non-compliance from superintendent's performance related to that OE. If 75% of them respond back that, yep, they felt that they were reasonably included in decisions that affected them, then it would be a pass on that indicator in terms of compliance from the superintendent.
So is this a policy or this is the superintendent's evaluation? Like, is it a policy, I guess, is what I'm wondering.
It's an operational expectation of the board. So all of the operational expectations spell out how we expect the superintendent to administer and manage the school district. And certainly, once you get to the evaluation perspective, the results and the OEs are incorporated into that superintendent's evaluation.
Okay.
If they're not compliant with, you know, several of the OEs, I would expect the board to find the superintendent to be in an unsatisfactory rating if they're not compliant with the operational expectations of the school board.
Okay. So is there, like it says, the board expects employees to have input in the decision-making process, is that? And that is indicating to include personnel in this, reasonably include personnel in decisions that affect them. The board expects employees to have input. So would you foresee as a board, at any time, could somebody just be assigned to a specific school in a specific position? Or, I mean, is there anything that falls outside of that?
I mean, I think certainly at the end of the day, the superintendent is the, you know, the CEO or chief administrator of the district has to be the one that makes a decision. Now, there should be conversations, in my opinion, with that employee, and we should try and first get people that maybe want to volunteer to move to those positions. But if nobody volunteers and enrollment dictates that for whatever reason, we need more sections of kindergarten at said school, and we've got to shift some things around, there may be instances where the superintendent's got to make that decision.
And I think that part of what we're talking about here is making sure that you've got the opportunity to be heard. And that's what it's saying here is that, you know, the ability to speak up and be heard and, you know, to be able to at least voice your thoughts and suggestions and all of those sorts of things, as opposed to said, you know, no input and you tomorrow there, that's the exact opposite of what is, we're trying to attain here.
I got the wheels working
Yeah.
in my brain right now, so if you see smoke coming out of my ears, that's what's happening, but I'm just thinking and I see your point. We don't want to open up ourselves to litigation. And that makes a lot of sense. That hurts everybody. So we understand that. Is there a way forward with? And maybe Seth, and maybe this is in your wheelhouse, but when I start thinking about like just simple professional recognition. The courtesy of being, and I don't know if it's the building part that could hang us up, or if it's the title of the teacher that could hang us up, or if it's both, or.
I think it's both. I mean, because if you're tying it, I'm thinking about this from a perspective of if I'm in the union shoes and I want to go to court over something like that, my argument is going to be that contract says that I'm going to be teaching in said building. If I'm not, that's a breach of the contract, and there'll be an attempt to use what they call the mandamus procedures to get, the district or board ordered to comply with that. If the building isn't the issue, and I'm a math teacher and I'm now, going to go teach Phi Ed, first, I hope we have a defibrillator handy, because it's going to be needed. But same thing, it's a contract term, material contract term that's not being complied with. The union has a path to seek direct enforcement of that through a lot of mechanisms. So it's both of them.
So if you're a math teacher going to teach Phi Ed, we're assuming that you're a math teacher being forced to go teach Phi Ed.
Yes.
Is where.
Yeah, we're talking, we're not talking about, the voluntary, hey, I think I can do this, or the discussion and all of that. It's just that it ties it's a specific contract term. It's like other contract terms of, health insurance is going to be provided. That's falls back into the negotiating agreement, but if there was a desire to no longer provide health insurance, well, there's a pretty straightforward breach of contract that's going on there. That would allow the union to go straight to court or through the grievance process and all that, to go, ultimately force that issue to enforce or make sure that term is complied with. That's when the rubber meets the road. That's the, putting specific terms in there like that is what causes the problem. But, we can, well, I'm doing the talking, you were.
No, that's okay. I'm interested to hear rationale, right? Like,
Yeah.
The why. With number 7, our proposal number 7. Which goes back to really what we were talking about earlier with voice and choice board policy. So 6 and 7 kind of run together. I had a couple questions, maybe they were already answered. One, how do we know that, this policy is being followed, and then what happens when this policy are not followed?
You're talking back.
Going back to, OE, was it 4?
Yeah, 4-.
4.
4.12. Yeah.
I can speak, I guess, to real world, what we went through. So I believe 4.12 was specifically referenced in the unsatisfactory evaluation and subsequent performance improvement plan that was implemented by the previous superintendent. So These are the mechanisms that the board has to make sure that the day-to-day operations of the school district are functioning and conforming within the expectations of the board. And when they're not, specifically to the indicators that have been referenced in the various OEs, that's how the board enforces or measures performance of the superintendent. And if they're violating a bunch of OEs, I certainly would expect that the board would act in accordance in terms of the evaluation process and putting corrective measures in place, hopefully for the superintendent to correct those issues, but if they remain uncorrected, then the board has decisions to make at that point on whether or not they retain that superintendent or not.
So really, our voice and choice is in board policy. That's the expectation of the board,
Understanding, right?
that
Understand.
Yeah, the board, I mean, we expect that there to be conversations with administration and you folks when these situations arise. And it doesn't mean that at the end of the conversation that, you know, you guys might necessarily agree with what the ultimate decision that the superintendent makes or doesn't make, but just marching into Jeff's office and saying, Jeff, you're going to teach math next year. That is not the board's expectation. That's not appropriate conduct and way of conducting business in the district.
Okay. Moving past, we've got some compensation pieces. Obviously, we wanted to get those to you early because we know that's some heavy lifting that we felt that you're gonna want those ahead of time to help with the process moving forward.
That's our specific questions so we can formulate plans, I guess, but.
I think we just leave that there and we just pop up when we get to that. We'll start with that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Being that it's 7:57, we button up against 8, we might have. We call it here and
We're flexible.
then when we get together next week, we'll just start where we left off. If that's all right with you guys.
Were you, just thinking about this holistically, we've got a goal of, I think about. I think the input was the date. We're into issues that are economic. And I think the sooner we actually get to, numbers and those sorts of things, I think it's helpful just because of what we have. in front of us. What would, you don't have to answer this right now if you don't know.
Oh, no, we won't answer it right.
Okay.
But go ahead, ask.
We should
anyways.
really start looking at when are we gonna dive in? Would it be your plan to have an economic proposal next meeting or what? And again, you need to. talk
Sure.
about that. I'm not asking you to answer. me
No,
right
and
now,
that's
but
fair.
we gotta think about it.
That's fair. I mean, again, just waiting on state aid, trying to figure out 2, 3. I heard we're now looking at 3. So it seems to be going back and forth because we want to be reasonable with our request. And so we just want to make sure we get that information. Quick question back. Do you happen to have one ready to go that you'd like to put out?
Not at this point, but I guess I would just respectfully say, these are negotiations where you're coming in and seeking increases in compensation. We already have a salary matrix and all sorts of things and, and it's your job, I get that. You're the ones asking for the increases. So respectfully, I think it's, incumbent on WIA to put that out there. What are you asking for? Because, I'm sure that if you left it alone, the board, would be fine with that as well.
Right, certainly would.
Yeah.
And in a game, if you're scoring at home, I'm pretty sure we're getting we're all 5-1 right now, so. Then maybe we can find some points with salary, because, as they say, money talks, right? So, yeah. But, we'll be reasonable. We'll try and get that situated, sooner than later, so we can do our best to meet those goals.
Would you like to know ahead of time if we're going to be bringing one?
I think it would be helpful, just think, I mean, in the event, as we're going through it, through the night, if we've got the ability to turn a counter around back to
Yeah.
you, we'd like to have our,
That would be one that we should try and have to you on a Sunday night, like beforehand or earlier. As soon as we have it, we can just get it to you.
or let us know that it's coming. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not saying that, I mean, if you want to send it in advance, that's great, we can prepare, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm more so asking if you are anticipating that next Tuesday, you're going to be prepared to have a salary proposal on the table. If you tell us that, not even without telling us what it is,
Sure.
that'll definitely get the wheels in motion on, seeing that we can get our piece done, so we can turn a response around there. I mean, it also allows us to ask better, more thoughtful questions once we've really gotten that.
As I see, I mean, we're down to about, I think, 2 proposals on each side, board proposals and we have proposals that maybe don't have an economic piece to it, so. I think it's fair to ask both sides that, for the next meeting, that I think we need to be ready to dig into the numbers, because that's kind of where we're at, I think, at this point. There's not a lot of non-economic pieces to talk about.
And that ties in with what I was gonna ask, you guys, tonight was with the Easter holiday, and we've got people moving and shaking. Would it be all right if we said next Tuesday, we'll take that next Tuesday off, and then we'll reconvene that following Tuesday, and then we've got that time there, I think we can safely say that we will have salary proposals then. Or would that put us behind the 8 ball
What
if we did?
Why don't we do this, just to, we're gonna, when we get done here, just like you are, we're gonna go back and kind of, remount, regroup and block us. We'll talk about that a lot. We'll certainly let you know right away, just thoughts on that.
And then we should.
I get what you're
hopefully-
saying.
We should hopefully be closer by that time too, to hopefully the folks in Bismarck are wrapped up. What's,
Most of the NDSBA, and I get a similar legislative update on the banking side. Neither one of them seemed optimistic that they were gonna finish before the end of April. The chatter in the halls is probably first week in May. If you're hearing anything different, Matt, but
In a second, kind of time frame.
well,
Well, we'll most certainly talk about, that and let you know right away. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not
Yeah.
looking to tell you the day before.
if that's something that makes sense and can be doable, I know we got lots of people moving and shaking out of town, and it's hard to pull everybody together on
Yeah.
a pretty special holiday. So,
Yeah.
I figured I'd put it out there, and if it was something that we could do, then okay, if not, then we understand and put our work boots on and try and figure it out.
Good. And thank you for bringing it up. We'll go ahead and take the tentative agreements and we'll get, get them teed up and all that, so they're ready to roll for signature wise and all that. Stuff.
so agenda for next meeting will be famous tonight, approved minutes. We can sign tentative agreements and then continue discussions. We do have some new TAs from.
Yep.
I think so.
And then you would be facilitating.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and I'll turn the recorder off. It's 8:04.
Already lost my notes on how